Okay, so let's dive in, folks. April 9th, 2025. Anyone watching the crypto markets probably felt things getting a little interesting.
Interesting. Might be one word for it.
Yeah. I mean, some pretty big drops that day.
Definitely some volatility there.
You know, the kind that makes you want to just sort of take a step back and figure out, okay, what's really going on here?
Exactly right, yeah.
What are the signals amidst all that noise?
That's exactly what we're going to do.
So welcome to the deep dive,
That's right.
where we try to cut through all the, the initial reactions and try to understand what the real story is.
Yep, and you've pulled together a fascinating set of sources today. So
I tried.
really interesting stuff. So yeah, we're going to try and connect some threads for everyone, give you a clearer picture of why things moved the way they did today, and maybe what we might see as a result.
Exactly. And we've got a lot to cover today.
We do.
Everything from how the media talks about economics and how that can impact crypto
Yeah.
to, some upcoming financial data points,
Mm-hmm.
some big regulatory discussions that are happening, and even some, pretty wild projections about the future of digital assets.
I love the wild ones.
So let's just jump right into it, huh?
Let's do it.
Okay, so April 9th, right?
Yeah.
That market dip.
Mm.
One of the interesting things that I saw was this idea that, the talk around tariffs might actually be having a bigger impact than the tariffs themselves.
Yeah, that's really interesting, isn't it? One of the sources you share pointed out that, the way the mainstream media was talking about tariffs seemed to be kind of a bigger driver for the price drop
Oh, interesting.
than the actual, details of what those tariffs were, maybe causing the sell-off. It was more the perception.
The feeling around it.
Exactly. They even suggested heading over to the White House website
Why?
to get the actual facts,
Straight from the source.
Exactly, like the goal of reducing national debt and having like reciprocal charges with other countries, that kind of thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, it makes you wonder how powerful that initial wave of news and sentiment can be.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Because if everyone's just reading these headlines that sound negative about the economy
Yeah.
because of tariffs, even if the real impact is still unfolding or maybe it's way more nuanced,
Right.
that fear itself can just become a self-fulfilling prophecy
It absolutely can.
in the markets.
Yeah.
And, it's interesting. We saw that the market sentiment index was down in fear territory
Wow.
at 24.
Really?
So people were really reacting emotionally to this.
Yeah, that's a huge reminder of how much psychology plays into the markets, especially in something as new and as kind of driven by sentiment as crypto.
For sure.
So sometimes understanding the headlines and just the general feeling out there is as important as understanding, the really deep economic stuff.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And it leads us into kind of the next thing, right?
Okay.
Which is that we have some potentially, really market-moving data coming out soon. The U.S. inflation numbers are due on April 10th.
That's right.
And, this is key for understanding the health of the U.S. economy.
Uh-huh.
And obviously, the U.S. economy impacts everything,
Yeah,
including crypto.
absolutely.
And so one of the sources pointed out this kind of interesting relationship
Okay.
between inflation data and how it actually impacts crypto prices.
Interesting.
Because it wasn't like a simple thing
Okay.
of high inflation bad, low inflation good.
Right.
Or the other way around.
Sure.
There were a few possibilities, and one that was particularly interesting was that lower inflation
Yeah.
could potentially lead to lower interest rates on loans,
Okay.
which would then encourage businesses to borrow more.
Right.
But the really interesting part was that this could then actually lead to a decrease in crypto prices.
So why would that be?
Yeah, that's a good question. And the source's kind of take on this was
Yeah.
that maybe because there's more traditional avenues for investment and growth opening up,
Mhm.
there would be less capital kind of flowing into these more speculative assets like crypto.
Interesting. So almost like counterintuitive that good news for the economy
Right.
could put downward pressure.
On crypto, yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was a really interesting take.
Right.
And on the other hand, they also said that higher inflation could lead to further price drops, likely because then people would be worried about the Federal Reserve tightening monetary policy, which tends to reduce liquidity across all markets.
Makes sense, yeah.
But then they also said that lower inflation could also boost crypto prices
Okay.
under different circumstances.
So it's a bit of a mixed bag.
It's a mixed bag. It's like
Yeah,
a lot of different factors at play.
absolutely.
Mhm.
But as they pointed out, the Bureau of Labor Statistics website, www.dls.gov,
The place to go.
is the place to go for the official numbers.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We'll all be watching that for sure.
Sure. All right, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about regulation. because there's an upcoming SEC crypto regulations roundtable happening on April 11th.
Okay.
And even the title of this thing is pretty interesting.
Yeah.
It's called Between a Block and a Hard Place, Tailoring Regulations for Crypto Trading.
Wow. It sounds like they're trying to really
Thread the needle.
thread the needle. Yeah. Find that sweet spot.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. And the fact that, even under the Trump administration,
Right.
the SEC is holding this kind of public forum. It's being led by Commissioner Hester Peirce, who's been, pretty open-minded about the crypto space in the past.
Right.
It suggests that they're really trying to gather different perspectives.
Yeah.
And the stated goal of finding that balance in regulating crypto trading is so crucial for the whole industry and its future.
And you can tell that they really want to get a lot of different opinions.
Yeah.
Just from looking at the list of attendees.
Who do we have?
So you've got folks from traditional finance, like people from the New York Stock Exchange, Dexter Capital.
Big names.
And then sitting right alongside them, you've got representatives from the crypto world.
Okay.
Notably Katherine Minarik from Uniswap Labs and Gregory Taw from Coinbase.
Interesting.
And the fact that someone from a decentralized exchange like Uniswap Labs is there,
Yeah.
I think is especially interesting.
It is, because a lot of the regulatory talk around crypto has really been focused on centralized exchanges, right?
Right.
So having a voice from the decentralized finance DeFi space at this level shows that they're understanding that the crypto world is much bigger than these centralized platforms.
Yeah, exactly. It's not just like Coinbase Finance.
Right, exactly. It suggests that the SEC is trying to really get their heads around, what are the unique challenges and opportunities with these decentralized exchanges.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And this is a big deal because this roundtable could actually lay the groundwork for new regulations about how crypto's traded.
So everyone in the space should be paying attention.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, let's kind of zoom out a little bit.
Okay.
Look a little more into the future here.
I like it.
We saw this report from Ripple and Boston Consulting Group
All right.
projecting a $16 trillion
Whoa.
market cap
Huge.
for real-world asset tokenization by 2030.
Wow. Okay.
You're talking about real estate bonds, commodities, and all these things that are traditionally less liquid and bringing them onto the blockchain.
That's a big number.
That's a massive number.
Wow.
And they highlighted some really interesting potential benefits.
Okay. Like what?
Greater liquidity because it would be easier to trade these assets.
Right.
Increased transparency because all the transactions are recorded on a public ledger. Greater efficiency.
Yeah.
Through streamlined processes.
Sure.
And maybe most excitingly for smaller investors, the possibility of fractional ownership.
Oh, wow.
So you could own a piece of something, like a high-value property,
Right.
without having to buy the whole thing.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it's a pretty exciting idea. But one of the sources that I was looking at, they injected a little bit of caution here.
Okay.
Reminded us that we've seen some, overly optimistic predictions in the past.
Right.
They specifically mentioned a PwC report on blockchain in supply chains.
Right.
That didn't quite pan out the way that people expected.
Okay, yeah.
And, the point wasn't to dismiss this whole idea of tokenization.
Sure.
But more to encourage us to think critically about, why are these reports being published? And should we maybe take these huge numbers with a grain of salt?
Right. So don't necessarily just take it at face value immediately.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, it's so interesting that this source even had their AI do a solo deep dive episode on this report.
Oh, wow. Really?
Which I think suggests there's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah. Definitely something to explore further, for sure.
Yeah. And it seems like this buzz around tokenization, it's really been building since Larry Fink.
Oh, yeah.
The CEO of BlackRock, started talking about it more after the Bitcoin ETF approval.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, okay, Bitcoin ETFs are here now. What's next?
What's the next big thing?
Right, exactly. And tokenization seems to be a big part of that conversation.
It does. And Fink's comments, brought a lot of attention and credibility
to the concept.
To the concept, right, from the mainstream financial world, which is huge.
But as your source pointed out, there are still some pretty big hurdles to overcome.
Like what?
For this to really go mainstream.
Yeah.
Issues like know your customer KYC and anti-money laundering AML.
Right.
On open permissionless blockchains. How do you actually do that?
Yeah.
And the complexities of, cross-border transfers of these tokenized assets, especially when you're talking about countries that are under sanctions.
Right.
These are not easy problems to solve.
No, definitely not.
Okay, let's talk about something completely different.
Okay.
This is a pretty unexpected piece of news.
All right.
Changpeng Zhao, CZ, yeah, the former head of Binance, has been appointed as an advisor to Pakistan's Crypto Council.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty surprising, especially given, the legal issues he's facing in the U.S. right now.
Right, exactly.
That's interesting.
But, despite all that, he's still a very influential figure in the crypto world.
Oh, absolutely.
And the CEO of Pakistan's Crypto Council, Bilal bin Saqib, seems to view this as a way to attract foreign investment and to help Pakistan develop, a regulatory environment that's friendly to digital assets.
Interesting.
And the source pointed out that crypto adoption is actually growing quite a bit in Pakistan.
Really?
Driven by things like, the instability of their traditional currency.
Right.
The need for people to be able to send and receive money from overseas, like remittances, and a growing number of people working in the Web3 space.
Interesting.
Right. And apparently stablecoins are really popular there.
Oh, wow.
As a way to kind of hedge against the devaluation of the rupee.
So in that context,
yeah,
bringing in someone with CZ's experience,
right,
even with, all the other stuff going on.
It makes a little more sense.
Yeah, it does, actually. He has so much experience, building and scaling a global crypto exchange.
Right.
And dealing with regulators all over the world.
Exactly.
So that kind of practical knowledge could be really valuable for Pakistan.
Yeah.
It seems like they're weighing the potential benefits against, the legal issues he's having elsewhere.
Right. It's a bit of a gamble.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so some more positive news now.
Okay, good.
At least for one of the big players in the crypto investment world.
All right, who are we talking about?
Galaxy Digital.
Okay.
They just got the green light from the SEC.
Oh, wow.
To move their stock listing to the NASDAQ.
Big move.
Yeah, big move under the ticker GLXY.
GLXY.
All right. But this is still pending a shareholder vote in May 2025.
And
they're currently listed in Toronto.
Okay.
But this move to the NASDAQ is a really big deal.
This is huge for them.
It is.
Yeah.
Like their CEO, Mike Novogratz, said, it's a key step in U.S. expansion.
For sure.
Getting listed on a major U.S. exchange like the NASDAQ, it's going to give them so much more visibility to American investors.
Right.
And it'll likely lead to, more trading volume. Potentially a higher valuation for the company.
Exactly.
And it's interesting because, with this NASDAQ listing, they're going to be offering a pretty wide range of services.
Okay. What kind of stuff?
So everything from the usual crypto trading, asset management, to even running AI and high-performance computing data centers.
Wow. So they're really branching out.
Yeah. I mean, it really shows how these companies are starting to diversify what they offer.
Yeah, it really signals a maturing of the industry, doesn't it?
It does.
They're looking to integrate more into both the traditional financial world and these new emerging tech spaces.
Yeah.
It's really interesting.
And it shows their ambition to really capitalize on the growing interest in crypto and these related technologies here in the U.S.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's shift our focus over to the Middle East for a second.
Okay.
There's an interesting development happening in Dubai.
Right.
The Dubai Land Department and Dubai's Virtual Asset Regulatory Authority are teaming up to link their real estate registry with property tokenization.
Wow. So you could have ownership of real estate actually represented as tokens on a blockchain.
Exactly.
That's really cool.
And they're creating a whole advanced government system to oversee this.
Wow.
And the goals are pretty ambitious.
Okay.
They want to make their property market more efficient for management companies.
Right.
They want to increase liquidity. Imagine, being able to buy or sell fractions of really valuable properties. So much easier.
That's cool.
Yeah. And they want, they want to make real estate investment more accessible.
Yeah.
Through fractional ownership. They want to attract more international investors.
Okay.
And they want all of this to support Dubai's broader economic goals.
Which are
outlined in their 2033 real estate strategy and their D33 economic agenda.
I see.
And, they're really touting this as the first agreement of its kind globally.
Wow.
And it follows a successful pilot program.
Really interesting.
And that focus on fractional ownership, I think, is really important.
It is, because real estate has always been this asset class that requires a lot of money to get into, right?
Right.
So fractional ownership through tokenization could open it up to so many more people.
Yeah, and potentially bring a lot of new capital into the Dubai market.
Yeah, that aligns perfectly with Dubai's reputation as this forward-thinking and business-friendly place.
Exactly.
It's a smart move.
But there is a big question that the source brought up.
Oh, okay.
That we don't really know the answer to yet.
Which is?
What blockchain platform are they going to be using?
Oh, right.
Will it be an open permissionless blockchain like Ethereum?
Yeah.
Or a private permissioned one?
That's a big distinction.
Yeah, and the source made it very clear. They were not a fan of permissioned blockchains.
Yeah. Why is that distinction so important?
I think it goes to the heart of the principles of decentralization and transparency.
Okay.
Right, because an open permissionless blockchain allows anyone to view the transactions.
Right.
To participate in the network, to varying degrees depending on the specific blockchain.
Sure.
And that fosters trust because everything is publicly verifiable.
Yeah.
But a permission blockchain, it restricts who can participate and who can see the data.
Right. So less transparency.
Yeah. And it's more centrally controlled. So, I think the source's stance is that they believe in open, trustless systems.
Yeah.
And so the choice of platform that Dubai makes is going to really dictate how open and accessible.
This whole tokenized real estate system is...
Exactly.
That's a big decision.
It is a big decision.
Yeah.
Okay, last but not least, let's talk about Saudi Aramco-backed Cognite making some big investments in India.
Okay.
Particularly in Bangalore for AI expansion.
Interesting.
Yeah, they're pouring a lot of money in, looking to sign deals with major Indian companies.
So this is really highlighting India's growing importance in the tech world.
Absolutely.
Especially in AI.
Yeah, and Cognite specializes in, AI-driven solutions to help optimize operations in safety and industrial settings.
Okay.
Like oil and gas platforms.
Makes sense.
And they clearly see India as a major growth market. Both for finding talent and for finding new clients.
Yeah, and the source pointed out that India is becoming a really attractive alternative to China for these global companies that are looking to diversify. And then that aligns with what Prime Minister Modi has been doing to try and attract international businesses. We're seeing this with other big players too, like Apple, Tesla, JP Morgan.
Yeah, they're all expanding their presence in India.
As a manufacturing and tech hub.
Exactly.
Really interesting to see that shift happening.
Yeah, and, AI in India has the potential to really change a lot of industries.
Like how?
It could make manufacturing more efficient, improve product quality, streamline supply chain management. And Cognite, expanding in Bangalore, which is a major tech and innovation hub, positions them perfectly.
You take advantage of that.
To take advantage of that growth, exactly.
That's a smart move.
And they've already got, a pretty impressive list of international clients.
Like who?
Including some big energy companies.
Okay.
Like BP Cosmos Energy Holdings, CO Chemical.
So they're well established.
They're well established, and it's worth noting that Cognite actually moved their headquarters to the U.S.
Oh, really?
To continue scaling globally. And Saudi Aramco, through Acre ASA, owns a pretty big chunk of the company. So this investment in India is clearly part of a bigger global AI strategy.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up here, it's fascinating to see how all of these seemingly separate things are actually connected.
Right.
From market jitters, possibly driven by, media headlines, to these global players making big bets on new technologies and evolving regulations.
It all feeds into this crazy...
It all feeds into this complex, ever-changing crypto landscape.
Absolutely.
Right? We saw how market sentiment can be swayed by these narratives.
Yeah.
And that can have a real impact on prices.
Real-world consequences.
Real-world consequences.
Yeah.
And we've got this inflation data coming out.
Right.
Which is a big piece of the puzzle.
Absolutely. A key indicator.
And then the SEC holding this public discussion on crypto regulation.
Yeah, that's huge.
Shows that things are really evolving in terms of how these assets are going to be governed.
For sure.
We talk about this ambitious future of real-world asset tokenization. The strategic and maybe controversial move by Pakistan to bring on CZ, Galaxy Digital, taking that big step towards expanding in the U.S. Dubai's really innovative approach to merging real estate with blockchain.
Yeah.
And India's rise as a global AI powerhouse.
Absolutely.
Fueled by investments like the one from Cognite.
Yeah, and every single one of these things could have a big impact on the future of the crypto world.
Absolutely. So as we kind of leave you with this to think about, Given this intersection of traditional finance, regulatory scrutiny, and all this technological innovation happening in the crypto space, how do you think the fundamental nature of digital asset ownership and trading is going to change?
Yeah, great question.
In the next few years.
Like, will we see centralized and decentralized systems kind of come together?
Right. Or will they remain separate?
Yeah, competing.
Or even competing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question to ponder.
Something to think about.
Definitely.
We encourage you to keep exploring these topics. Maybe even go back and check out some of those original sources that we mentioned today.
Dig a little deeper.
To really dig deeper.
That's what we're all about.
Thanks for joining us for the deep dive.
See ya.